I'm very, very honored to be part of this closing and to also especially celebrate and thank everyone who shared and spoke in the roundtables today, which I've been seeing online. We were joined by over 200 people, and it was really quite extraordinary, the level and the caliber of the discussion. What we're really looking forward to now is a closing that is clear and short and motivates us to actually move forward to implement the outcomes of these COPs and to ensure that this critical year of national and local and Indigenous peoples' action on these issues can live up to its potential. What Christina and Iman and others called the legal super year is coming to a close in 2024. I don't know what comes after super. Mega? We may need a mega year in the one to come with the International Court of Justice probably delivering its decision, and with the national level strategies and action plans and nationally determined contributions being adopted. So I'm going to thank everyone for having joined us for this closing plenary, especially those who are here with us next to me or online. And I'm going to turn immediately to the focus of this session, which is on forward legal strategies. What is needed going forward to implement and advance international law in relation to the climate, nature, and land? And if we can solve that, then clearly our world will be a much, much better place. I understand that Professor Damilola is not yet online. I can see Justice Jawad Hassan is with us. I can see Judge Kathy Ann Brown is with us as well. I can see Professor Christina Voigt is with us. I can see Professor Wayne Garnell-Williams is with us. So we're going to move forward with you. And I see that one of our chairs from the Biodiversity Plenary is with us. Hello, Daniel. It's good to see you again. And we're going to move forward with them. And then if Payam or Dami are able to join us, we will make sure that they are able to also be online. I understand Tejas, is Zunaida still trying to join to be here by the time we launch the book that is in front of us all? I'm hoping so. I'm hoping so. So we will first turn to our expert speakers who kindly agreed to join us and to give us some thoughts, especially from Christina's point of view. We would greatly appreciate it, although we know you're doing a great deal of work on nature and forests. If you can give us some thoughts about what is needed going forward to implement and advance international law in relation to the climate. And then we will turn to Advocate Wayne Garnell-Williams, who is chair and founding president of the Indigenous Intertribal International Trade and Investment Organization, among many other affiliations. If he could give us some thoughts on especially the biodiversity and land work that he was doing in Biodiversity Law and Governance D. And if we are joined by Professor Payam Akyavan, who it's not sure because of technical reasons, who is of course a member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration and of Massey College in Toronto, then we will welcome him. And if not, we will move forward to our keynotes, who I will introduce right after. So Professor Voigt, chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, founding co-chair of the Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee, the PEC, longtime fellow, beloved fellow of the CISDL and now senior fellow. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Marie-Claire. Cordonnier Sager, thanks for that kind introduction. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really sorry for not being able to be there in person. I did have to teach today. That prevented me from traveling, but I'm really glad to join that closing plenary. Just to jump straight into your question. Well, first of all, when I referred to the legal super year, I was actually referring to 2025 because I said it in the context of the NDCs having to be put forward Actually, on Monday next week, the 10th of February, we'll see how many parties actually comply with that obligation. But it is indeed a time where law stands at the forefront of international legal developments on climate change. To answer your question, I think there are many elements that are needed going forward, but I will focus briefly on two. But they're not exhaustive. There may be much more that can be and most likely has been discussed throughout this wonderful event today. The first one is the absolute necessity to embrace and support and strengthen environmental multilateralism. I think all of us who care about the environment, whether it is climate, whether it is forest, land, nature, the oceans, we know the need for environmental multilateral agreements that bring together states in collective action. And it is under threat. It has been under threat for a while, but we see this threat coming forward in various ways. And I don't have to detail exactly what I'm talking about, but putting our joint forces together to support and to strengthen what we have, I think is absolutely crucial. It is, let me give you an example. You mentioned the way to COP30 and Belém, and Alessandra is there. And we probably see each other if there are any hotel rooms left in Belém. And one example is to really support the COP process, both on the way to COP30 and beyond, because we have seen a lot of criticism coming forward to the COPs in the last couple of years. Only last year, COP29 in Baku was highly criticized from various ends for various reasons from different people. But I think it is very important to realize and to remember ourselves what the COP actually can do, what the COP is, what it can deliver, and what it cannot deliver. Because an annual COP under the climate regime, under the biodiversity, it's biannual, but an annual COP cannot save the world. But there are expectations that every single COP is the most, it's probably the most important one, but must save the world. But this is not possible. And if it doesn't succeed in saving the world, then criticism gets loud and reform proposals are being put forward, all the way to really undermining the process going forward. So I think what is very important is have profound understanding of what a COP can deliver, maybe to roll down a little bit the expectations of what the outcomes can be, in particular in relation to the mandates of every COP. And I think that's very important moving into COP30, because the formal mandates for COP30 are very few and far in between, and there is not really a big agenda item on that COP. So it's going to be very important to understand what COP30 can do and cannot do, and what the presidency makes out of it. But in addition to reality checking the expectations that one can and should have to the COP, I think it's also important to remember that there isn't really an alternative, right? There really isn't an alternative to those annual or biannual gatherings that actually does bring together the entire world in a discussion. Hard discussion. These are very difficult decisions to be made, but it is a get-together of all voices, and where all countries also meet on an even level. I think a related point is that we need to appreciate and use the outcomes of the COPs much better. Two very brief examples: COP23 in Dubai, with the outcome of the global stocktake, again was highly criticized that it did not include a reference to phasing out of fossil fuels, but transitioning away. Well, in the end, I think the difference is marginal, but using the outcomes, using that language, using the COP decision in particular on the GST is absolutely important. And it's a legal one because the GST outcome needs to inform the next round of NDCs. And I hope that has happened because they're due, as I said, on Monday. Or another example, and I'm sure you all discussed this today, the outcome from COP29 on the NCQG, the finance outcome. Of course, expectations were high of what that outcome would provide, but it's also a very difficult outcome to negotiate. But honestly, an outcome that doubles the initial amount from 100 billion to 300 billion and puts forward a process to increases to 1.3 trillion by 2035 is a important and extraordinary outcome, and it stands to ask, what alternative process would be able to deliver such an outcome if you criticize that COP process for not having delivered. So I think it's very important to reality check what we can possibly expect from these processes, and if they deliver, when they deliver, to use what we get both in our work as lawyers, as scholars, as judges and policymakers. And very briefly to my second point. So the first point was support and strengthen and embrace multilateralism. And the second point is, of course, to work on the effective implementation of what we have. I think this is always a struggle, that there's always something new, something on the horizon that is interesting, that's exciting, and that's also important. But we also have a lot of international treaties, of decisions, of advisory opinions from international courts and tribunals, and I nod to Judge Kathy-Ann Brown from the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. So when it comes to the Paris Agreement, when it comes to the global biodiversity framework adopted under the CBD now 2.5 years ago, these processes need to be broken down. And I know you, Marie-Claire, and many of our community are working on that, need to be broken down to national processes, to national legislative, regulatory initiative, and need to be implemented, complied, and enforced with. And just two brief example. One is, of course, the global biodiversity framework, which with its 23 targets, which still somewhere hang there in the air and which have to be broken down to a national level. And the other example is the wonderful advisory opinion from the International Tribunal on Law of the Sea, which says squarely that greenhouse gas emissions, human-made greenhouse gas emissions, are pollution of the marine environment, and details what the obligations are to reduce and control these emissions. But yet the follow-up from that very important advisory opinion is still waiting in many countries. It hasn't really trickled down to national implementing or changes to national frameworks. And we, of course, are all waiting for the International Court of Justice to find a spare moment to issue its advisory opinion. The court is busy, and of course, the workload is immense. But we do hope that at some point this year, the ICJ will put forward its advisory opinion, and hopefully this will again trigger effective action implementing the agreements that we have and the world has made. Now, this all has to happen in an integrated manner. And I know, Marie-Claire, you asked me particularly about climate change, but it cannot be siloed out, right? It has to be seen in relation to nature protection, to oceans, because it is all interconnected. And I think this is another challenge that yet has to be overcome, of how to design legal responses, regulatory responses on the integrated protection of all the different parts of our wonderful environment. And I think Ayman Shakawi already mentioned it. The IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law is organizing its 4th World Environmental Law Congress in Rabat in Morocco from the 5th of 7th of May next year, which looks at the integration of air, ocean, and land protection. And you're all very much invited to join us in Rabat. And with that, many thanks, and back to you, Marie-Claire.
Thank you as well. You're right, I mentioned it in the beginning, but you're reminding us properly so that we will all be ensuring that this one is a star constellation in our calendar. I'm going to turn now to Advocate Wayne Garnall-Williams, again with our warmest of thanks for the incredible panel that he organized prior to giving the closing keynote in Biodiversity Law and Governance Day. And Wayne, is perfectly fine for you to also say, by the way, climate change also affects Indigenous people, given that Christina crossed the boundaries and actually did present an integrated perspective quite brilliantly and eloquently. You're free to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I would like to echo Permanent Secretary of Cameroon, Prudence Galana's opening remarks in today's conference, where she stated that COP29 witnessed a lot of progress in being inclusive of Indigenous peoples and small communities, as these are the people that live on the land and are engaged in the closest relationship with their local ecosystems. Now, COP29 included some outcomes that acknowledge the role of Indigenous peoples in climate action. For example, the Baku Work Plan adopted a plan to elevate voices of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the action plan, and that's great. As well, a renewed mandate for the Facilitated Working Group, the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform, the LCIPP. And that is an open and inclusive space that brings together Indigenous people and local communities with their Indigenous and local knowledge systems that help build climate resilience for the world. Now, the platform was established to strengthen the knowledge, technologies, practices, efforts of local communities and Indigenous peoples related to addressing and responding to climate change. It also facilitated the exchange of experience and the shared best practices of lessons learned on mitigation and adaptation in a holistic and integrated manner. Now, that's all well and good, but some Indigenous advocates were disappointed by the final outcomes, which they say fall short of what's needed to address climate change. Now, along that line, the Baku Plan and the Facilitated Working Group should not evolve to become a ghettoized place to house minority voices where their input is given lip service and irrelevancy to nation states. Instead, these initiatives should be elevated to connect Indigenous and community traditional knowledge around the world with leading environmental experts and key influential policymakers, so that work that has developed in this group can be shared with the world and implemented, so that we can help influence and shape both international environmental law and policy, but also positively educate, inform, and inspire nation states to embrace this traditional and local community knowledge, to adapt policies to match it. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I always cite this because it's important to cite. The World Economic Forum 2020 Global Risk Report advised that Indigenous nations, through their unique experience, are best suited to help nation states meet these international environmental goals. And they wrote, and I quote, "Humanity relies on Indigenous communities to be stewards of ecosystems, protecting and preserving environmental resources. Indigenous peoples comprise less than 5% of the world's population, but protect 80% of its biodiversity," unquote. These are really important to remember when we're dealing with Indigenous and local communities. So in closing, Indigenous people need to be at the climate negotiation table with nation states, to teach them to move away from simply treating our ecosystem as a capital resource, and to demonstrate to the world how Indigenous peoples have time-honored environmental relationships with nature for sustainable economic development. Those teachings, those principles, the world needs to embrace for our future. So those are my closing remarks, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. And these are really important points to be making. I will say, as you know, I've spent the last few weeks and nights until 3 or 4 in the morning working on the proofs for the new Sustainable Development Law textbook with Oxford University Press. And in the chapter on decolonization, we look at the changes that we've seen
and the many more changes that are needed in the structure of international law to truly ensure that different cultures, different voices, different views can be heard. And we're so far from perfect. Christina's right, it's the only system we've got. It's less unequal than anywhere else where people can try to be heard and where countries can try to be heard. That certainly doesn't mean that there aren't ways that it really needs to move forward. And I would especially recognize Advocate Tejas Rao, who's in the room, because he's doing some of the leading scholarship in this area, together with Tony Angie and others who we're citing in the book. I am now going to turn with great pleasure and really, truly a privilege to our two closing keynotes. Before I do, I'd like to introduce someone that Christina probably can't see, but is in the room and she'll recognize. And I wonder if Rashad, Dean Rashad from ADA Law Faculty, if you could come up. We have one extra seat. We're holding it for you. Please come up and join us, in part just so that the folk online can see you as well. He's come all the way from Azerbaijan to be here with us, and now we're all getting deja vu of the Climate Law and Governance Day. But especially with Justice Kathy Ann Brown joining us and Justice Jawad Hassan joining us. So I'm very, very honored, of course, to invite Kathy Ann Brown, who is one of the laureates of the Weir-Mantry International Justice Award and a judge on the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. And she has joined us, I understand, from Jamaica, which means I'm glad we're holding this at this time and not in the morning. But Kathy Ann, please, we would welcome your remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I'm also very glad that it's the afternoon. This year, we anticipate receiving 2 more international advisory opinions on climate change, that of the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, and that of the ICJ. The international environment in which these courts will deliver their advisory opinions is quite different from that which prevailed when ITLAS, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, delivered its opinion in May of 2024. Between December 2022 and April of 2023, 3 parallel initiatives were taken to request advisory opinions from 3 different international courts, addressing distinct but overlapping and complementary concerns about states' obligations with respect to climate change. The sequencing of these requests meant that the ITLAS advisory opinion was apparently cited more than 260 times by proponents and opponents in the ICJ oral hearings. I found it interesting that these sorts of statistics are actually generated. There is no general hierarchy between courts in the international system. Courts are attentive to the jurisprudence of other courts, and there is a growing practice of cross citations. ICJ Judge Greenwood, a little more than a decade ago, observed that international law is a single unified system of law, and each international court can and should draw on the jurisprudence of other international courts and tribunals, even though it is not bound necessarily to come to the same conclusions. Most states accept the existence of an obligation to mitigate climate change, but they disagree on the content of that obligation in terms of what this means for each state individually and collectively. An advisory opinion entails an authoritative statement of international law on the questions with which it deals. They address the law in broad, general terms. To paraphrase the words of Judge Nalta in the 2024 advisory opinion on the occupied Palestinian territory, advisory opinions offer a legal characterization of the facts and law, not a legal determination of responsibility for individual acts. He added, the conclusions of the court in advisory opinions are not the end, but the beginning of a process. Therefore, the conclusions made in advisory proceedings complement and facilitate, but can never replace other procedures for the peaceful settlement of disputes. If one looks at the ICJ's previous advisory opinions, such as Kosovo, the occupied Palestinian territory, or nuclear weapons, it is fair to observe that these opinions fail to satisfy both proponents and opponents. In the nuclear weapons advisory opinion, the president of the ICJ, in one of his rare separate opinions, explained that the court sought, and I quote, to state the law as it is, seeking neither to denigrate nor embellish it. He added that it was for states and not the ICJ to correct the imperfect on human rights will likely have its say. The Inter-American Court has jurisdiction to provide advice on any provision in any treaty dealing with the protection of human rights, whatever the principal purpose of such a treaty, and whether or not state of the American states. The court's 2017 advisory opinion on the environment and human rights provides insights into the approach it may take in its much anticipated advisory opinion on climate change. The court made extensive reference to the jurisprudence of status of the right to a healthy environment. Subsequently, in contentious proceedings, it applied the right and found that it had been violated. This was a bold move. And the Inter-American Court has built a reputation for being a very progressive court. The ICLA's advisory opinion was unanimous. The impact of the two awaited advisory opinions may depend in part on whether the justices find common ground and on how they articulate this in a year when the rule of law is being tested. But the opinions are not an end in themselves. The impact is dependent on how you receive them and use them to inform the discourse towards positive outcomes in the coming year. That's the thought I wanted to share. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Justice Kathy Ann, you have reminded us in the most eloquent, articulate, and courageous way possible that judges are also incredibly good advocates and lawyers. And thank you. That was extremely well researched and extremely well argued and completely correct. And you're issuing a challenge to the world, and it's our job to respond to it appropriately. A good thing to be doing on a day like today when we are launching a book called Courage, Contributions, and Compliance. So thank you again. And we will certainly be taking your thoughts forward. I stand corrected by my dear friend, Christina, in the legal super year that is to follow. Perhaps it's a legal biennial, because certainly the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea has stood up very courageously. And we understand the context may have changed, but the principles that you speak of certainly remind us that more must and can be done as we move forward. Speaking of responding to climate change, the Honorable Justice Jawad Hassan, who is of course a sitting judge in Lahore High Court, Pakistan, has been with us fighting on this front for years. And we are deeply, deeply pleased to have him with us to deliver the other keynote closing address for this symposium. Justice Jawad, the floor is yours.
Good evening, all of you. I must say that COP30, because what we can see now is to focus on COP30. As we all say 30-30, that when the 1972 Stockholm Conference came, we forgot the judiciary. Then in 1992 in Rio, the judiciary was not a part of the UN. And then 2002 in Johannesburg, when South Africa, they included judiciary. And since then, 2002, after 30 years of 72 Stockholm Conference, judiciary was involved. That's the number game. Is now COP30 is going to be very important, because when we were at Baku, a very successful outcome of Baku was that the Antonio Benjamin, now the country who's hosting the COP30, was now asked to involve the judiciary in COPs, because judiciary plays a very important and critical interdependence with the issues of climate change now. As you see, the whole world is looking at the copycat cases. The cases coming from Pakistan to America to Europe to Brazil to all over the world, the judiciary has to be involved now in the issue of climate change and COPs. Though COPs, the Conference of Parties, they are state issues, but judiciary has been now, as you can see, I was in Mary Claire and all, we were in Dubai, there was no other judges, with only two of us, me and Mansoor Shah, we spoke. But then last year, we in Baku, we can see a lot of judges coming in and a lot of issues are there. That shows that judiciary plays a very, very important part. What is the issue is could be that that Pakistan is now we focusing that we successfully had to say that we have launched a climate finance strategy because climate finance is something very important. COP30 focuses on climate finance from private sector to a public sector because it has been has been done to earth. This issue has been with us for almost 150 years. We call it nuisance 800 years ago. We call it negligence 80 years ago. We called it tort 60 years ago. We called it environment 50 years ago. We called it environmental protection. We called it environmental management. Now we're calling climate justice, climate finance, environmental justice. But this issue is the same. We have to protect the issues of earth together. Judiciary in the world is not figured out. They are fighting some good cases. We need your support. What I can see for future is that COP30 will play a very important role by involving judiciary in these kind of decisions and in these kind of the conferences. Like what and when this forum, Professor Mary Claire is now has more people to join in. We have every player in the ecosystem of the climate justice together with us, from academics to judiciary to government servants to researchers to scientists to people who are bureaucrats. We are all together to deal with this. And this is a kind of a platform where you can see everybody under one roof for one word, that is to protect our earth, which is the mother. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Justice Shawad. And while there are so many things I could say about your courage in the face of the floods in Pakistan and the dramas in the COP in which you have found yourself sometimes playing the other role of a judge as the one serious person in the room, I think what I would want to especially highlight is that during the Climate Law and Governance Day in Baku, we had 3,200 people who had registered. We received a letter from a single registration, one registration that we had on our list. And of course, it was the dean of a women's law school that you had helped to found in Pakistan, who had gathered together all of the young women lawyers in her entire school and brought them into a hall together at some incredible time of day or night in order to watch the climate law on that one registration link, in order to be there with us in the COP and see what was happening. And it's that kind of commitment, because I know exactly who gave that dean the contact and said, you must be there. This is the law we need in our country. It is exactly that kind of commitment and that kind of willingness to connect people that you have also done, which is deeply, deeply valued in building this global community. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
I want to say one thing, that even after the COP, a 3-year-old girl, as I mentioned, that she came and filed a case in Pakistan where they had no right to file because Lahore is the most polluted city in the world, most toxic city, highest rate of toxicity. And then she said, I can't go to school, I can't go to the garden, I can't see my parents, I'm stuck in the home with my laptop. And who can talk about so I had to use the Antonio Pasa judgment of the Philippine Supreme Court, saying intergenerational rights, the doctrine to talk about future, this future belongs to us. And that's what we are undergoing, inshallah. Very soon, I'll be rendering a judgment on that case, and I'll share with you. how we are developing out and learning from you and all of you a new concept of intergenerational right of a 3-year-old saying that you have got, my life is stuck in one room with the air purifiers and with the laptop. I cannot go anywhere because of the highest rate of pollution. And this is how the whole world is focusing into. So I'm thank you to all of you for this kind of opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you as well. We will be watching for your judgment. We're coming to the end of our program and we're in good time. And this next part, of course, is no surprise to anyone who was part of Climate Law and Governance Day in Baku or Biodiversity Law and Governance Day in Cali. And Daniel is online with us and Lara is here with us in person. It would have been a lot to ask you, Daniel, to come all the way from, you are in Malaysia at the moment? Yeah, might have been a bit of an ask and not very good in terms of carbon miles. But I understand that we are, with one online and one in the room, able to launch both of the reports from the days, which were, of course, incredibly intense with, in some cases, 4, 5, 6 things going on in parallel. None of us were able to follow everything. We could just stand in awe of the incredible expertise and energy that was being gathered. So I'm going to hand over to Lara. I will ask her, because it's a launch, we want photos of you. We're going to ask you to go up to the mic. I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is.
For you, Mary.
Thank
Always
you.
for you.
And Daniel, you're online as well. And I understand we are, this is a new role, our rapporteur, and she corralled all the other rapporteurs. And so I want to especially thank her and also Daniel and the entire team for the work they did. And over to you, Lara.
Well, thank you. As Marie-Claire said, my name is Lara Duvartsidis. I am an Aussie qualified commercial lawyer, so very used to doing things in very tight deadlines, which was useful for the special rapporteur role. It would not have been possible without the many moderators, rapporteurs we had on the day. As Professor Marie-Claire said, you can't be in all places at once, and to have done this job all myself, I would have had to split myself in 5 for an entire day. So thank you to predominantly the students, particularly from ADA University, who put their hand up. We thank you so much. And to the wider CISDL team, on the day, towards the end of the day, I was receiving photos of many of you dehydrated and on the ground. It is no mean feat, and there's so much invisible work that goes into each year's Climate Law and Governance Day. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating in it. As Marie-Claire recalled, this is, and last year was, a legal super year, but I would further add to that, Advocate Eamon, if he is listening, said something very funny, which I confirm has made its way to the final report, because that's what I thought was good, and so that's what we did. I now read it to you. It was noted that 2025 is set to be a legal super year, with climate law and governance lawyers described as the Justice League of climate change. So I think that's an important thing to recall in the coming year.
Justice League. Oh,
that
no.
is what Eamon said.
Of course you did.
Yeah. The Climate Law and Governance Day proceeding report makes clear that lawyers are essential in the delivery of the 1.5 degree pathway. And to keep that dream alive and to recognise our unique roles, international law is so important for norm setting, or as Wendy Mars said only an hour ago, what the law should be, and domestic law to implement and reshape legislation to facilitate finance flows and NDC alignment. Again, as a commercial lawyer from Australia, as someone who grew up on the Ghana land and practiced law on the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, I just want to note Advocate Wayne Garnos William and his reminder to all of us to be cognizant of, and the report captures it as, industrial Eurocentric modes of thinking, and instead be open to environmentally grounded relationships and long-term thinking on environmental sustainable development. As someone who's been in a law firm for years and is now in more of a law and policy role, but always working with commercial lawyers. If every lawyer I know and we all knew made decisions based on the 7-generation rule that Wayne talked about, I think we'd find ourselves in a much better position. And on that, you know, I wear my Aboriginal flag hat very proudly, Wayne, in everywhere I go. And I think it's really important. And for me, that is the biggest takeaway. But of course, what you see depends on what you look for. So I would urge all of you to read the report and find what your takeaways are for the next year. And perhaps, if I can be so bold, to set that as homework so that at the next Climate Law and Governance Day, we build on what we have discussed previously and we don't forget what we have learned. So for now, look after yourself. This is going to be a rocky year for many of us. Drink your water, stay hydrated, and just remember, and I say that because so many of you have become so dehydrated in all the sessions and events that we have held. So this is just a health and safety reminder. Look after yourselves, look after each other. We need each other. So thank you so much, and we will see you at the end of this year. Thank you.
It's on the Climate Law and Governance Initiative's website. If you go to Climate Law and Governance Day 2024, you will find a few of the links to find the highlight and outcome statement from the year. You'll find the full program from the event, and you'll find a link to the preceding report that was wonderfully edited by Laura and, of course, contributed to by the student volunteers.
Absolutely. We're going to also just turn to Daniel to make a brief announcement. Obviously, Kali happened a little bit before Baku, but his team worked equally hard, some of the same people, worked 4,000 hard in short notice to produce as well the Biodiversity Law and Governance Day Proceedings Report. Daniel?
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. Good evening, esteemed colleagues. And first of all, I'd like to say a special thanks to my team, to the Biodiversity Law and Governance Day team that worked extremely hard to put this report together. And also I would like to thank our host, Pontificia Universitat Javeriana Cali. And I will just give you a brief summary of what the report is about. As you know, the day was on October 26th, and it was during the COP of the CBD. We had about 2,000 participants from 132 countries, legal experts, policymakers, academics, and representatives from international organizations. One of the central discussions focused on the legal frameworks and identified international instruments like the CBD, CITES, and the Nagoya Protocol as critical tools to strengthen biodiversity governance and ensure global cooperation. Another issue that was vital in our discussions was the role of indigenous knowledge and treaty law in biodiversity conservation. And discussions highlighted the idea that communities must have legal recognition and leadership roles in governance frameworks, and also discussed the need to uphold indigenous land rights and integrate traditional ecological knowledge into policy and decision making. We also had discussions regarding financing. We discussed biodiversity credit markets, green bonds, and also how corporate governance and financial regulations could be mechanisms to encourage responsible environmental investments. Another critical discussion that we had was around the idea of environmental harm. Legal experts and advocates debated how ecocide law can be a tool for climate action. And also participants explored the idea that legal frameworks could be used to prevent environmental destruction even during warfare, and it could be also used for post-conflict restoration efforts. Finally, we had showcase of youth-led initiatives, and we also had the reaffirmation that investing in youth capacity building and leadership is crucial for long-term biodiversity governance. In conclusion, the Biodiversity Law and Governance Day 2024 generated a momentum that demonstrates that biodiversity law and governance is not just a legal matter, but also an essential pillar of our collective future. The Biodiversity Law and Governance Initiative remains committed to advancing this work and to ensure that biodiversity is protected and governance is strengthened. And as part of those commitments, we have our report available in our website, and I hope that it provides valuable insights and that it also enhances further discussions. I encourage you all to check it out and to join us in our mission. And with that, many thanks for the chance to present our report. Over to you, Marie-Claire.
Well, thank you. Deeply appreciated all of the work involved. And I will say, actually, as you know, under my chair here in Cambridge, based at Lucy Cavendish College, we have been offering online courses, short key essentials briefings on the Paris Agreement, on the Global Biodiversity Framework, and on other important sustainable development goals and the legal frameworks that support them globally. And it was incredibly inspiring to see so many of our learners who had taken these short online courses, including the one on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, joining us online and holding their own representatives to account in Biodiversity Law and Governance Day and in Climate Law and Governance Day, and actually asking what more could be done to the negotiators who were right at that time in the middle of the COP, saying yes to some things and no to others. And I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can actually change the way that international law is both made and also especially those promises are kept. And that is, of course, the massive challenge, because we fail on that. We fail on, well, the survival of our entire planet. A bit of a serious one there, right? And that includes all of us as part and parcel of that planet, as Wayne reminded us. So very, very good work. Thank you especially to Lara and Maeve and Antoinette and Ananya and the entire team who were really tireless in this work to pull together Climate Law and Governance Day and the associated events in Baku. And of course, especially also to Daniel, Lucia, and Natalia, and the entire team and network who were revolutionizing Biodiversity Law and Governance Day in Cali. And most especially underlining both and also leading our delegation in Riyadh at the Certification Convention, Tejas, who was helping with all of the above and deeply, deeply appreciated. So please, Tejas, Maeve, and Antoinette. We have little gifts for you that you can take home. They're also edible, so you can come and talk to them afterwards. So Maeve, we will give you something that probably travels. and Tejas, you also have to travel. So, and Antoinette is at the back. We're going to pass it to you in a real tradition here. And Lara, you get a Pavarotti bar. If you have to train home, that trains well.
Thank you.
So, well, absolutely. And now we come to our final celebration of the day, and I'm turning to Professor Christina, who is online, and also to Zenaida Wadiwala Musa, who is also online. And of course, it is the launch of something that was about 9 years in the making, and involves many of you actually over the various consortia that were formed in some cases to get the right chapter with the right points. And it is finally in our hands. And I understand, Zenaida and Christina, you have a copy of this also where you are. That reached you. We had a sort of a funny moment in December and January where people's copies were finally actually reaching them all over the world, and they were posting a picture of them holding it in Manila and in South Africa and in Cambridge and in Oslo. But we are incredibly proud and happy to be finally doing the first soft launch online and in person of the Routledge Handbook of Climate Law and Governance, Courage, Contributions, and Compliance. And Christina, so that you don't have to say it, I will. Courage, Contributions, and Compliance is actually the real title of the book, just for obvious reasons. So I'm going to turn to my co-editor who had to bear with us for the 9 years. And then, of course, the busiest year of her life was finally when we were finishing it. And she stayed with it. She reviewed meticulously many footnotes and entire sections, and corrected a lot of mistakes that otherwise would have appeared, especially from my chapters. And we're really deeply grateful. And I'll turn first to Christina, and then I'm going to turn to Zenaida, without whom obviously the entire project would be impossible. Christina, would you like to say a few words?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you so much. It's a very special moment. I do have my copy here, and I'm very happy to hold it in my hands after this long process. But first of all, my deep thanks and gratitude goes to you, Marie-Claire, because you've been the burning heart of this endeavor for so long, and it has been a moving target, as climate law is, right? The moment we know something else is coming up, and we've been waiting for the right moment to publish this this wonderful book. It has been a lot of work, and I do apologize that the finalization coincided with a very busy year for myself, but you did an amazing job to get everyone behind this project. And I think the result that we now hold in our hands in different parts of the world is what I think currently is the most up-to-date and the most comprehensive book on climate law and governance out there on the market. And it is really remarkable because it has benefited from so many different voices and perspectives and inputs. It is balanced, it is concise, and I think it's a wonderful reading for everyone who is interested in climate law and governance. And that may be students from the first year to the last year of the university. They don't have to be law students. Hopefully there are also many other faculties that are interested in this book, but also judges, policymakers, negotiators, the interested public in general, CEOs of multinational companies and whoever. I think it's a wonderful, rich publication that we managed to get together. And my great thanks goes to all the contributors, because there are very many of them who spent their time and their energy in writing the different chapters. And of course to Zenaida, who will speak soon. But it is a wonderful moment to celebrate together that soft launch of this joint project. Thank you, Marie-Claire.
Thank you, Christina. I have a few late nights that I'm remembering. They somehow seem very close. Zenaida, over to you, and with all of our warmest gratitude for your line-by-line review of every single sentence in this book at least 15 times, and for corralling all of the authors, many of whom are in the room. We are all grateful to you, Zenaida, for corralling us and making sure that we got things in on time. Zenaida, can we hear you? We may need help.
Yes, I think you can.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire and Christina, and good evening to everyone. It's really a privilege to be here with you today to mark the soft launch of this project, which has been very close to my heart, the Routledge Handbook of Climate Law and Governance, in which I had the honor of serving as assistant editor. So before I go any further, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to the incredible team that made this project possible, from our esteemed editors and authors to the contributors who have brought their expertise to the pages. This book is a collective effort, and it truly wouldn't have come together without each of you. The Routledge Handbook of Climate Law and Governance is more than just an academic collection. It is a roadmap for understanding the complex intersection of law, policy, and governance in the context of climate change. With contributions from global experts, this book offers innovative perspectives on the legal frameworks and governance structures that will shape our collective response to climate challenges. In a time when climate change is one of the most urgent issues we face, this book explores how law and governance can contribute more effectively and equitably solutions. From international agreements to local policy innovations, it dives deep into the legal instruments and governance structures that must evolve to address the global climate crisis. As the assistant editor, I had the privilege of working alongside a brilliant team of scholars and professionals to ensure that the ideas presented in this book are both insightful and actionable. The work is a blend of rigorous research and thoughtful reflection on what needs to change and how we can make those changes happen. A project like this would not have been possible without the expertise and vision of the contributors who have brought their diverse knowledge to the forefront of climate law. Our lead editors, Professors Marie-Claire and Christina, have guided this book from inception to completion with unparalleled dedication. I'd also like to thank the publishing team at Routledge for their invaluable support in bringing this book to life. From coordinating submissions to ensuring the final product meets the highest academic standards, their work behind the scenes has been indispensable. This book is not just a reflection of current climate governance. It is a call to action. As the world continues to face escalating environmental challenges, understanding the legal and governance systems that guide our efforts is more crucial than ever. I am proud to have played a role in bringing this work to the public, and I'm excited for all of you to explore the chapters that tackle pressing issues such as climate justice, environmental degradation, regulation, and the role of international cooperation. I encourage you all to engage deeply with the book, to reflect on its contents, and to take these conversations into your own work and communities. Together, we can continue to build the solutions necessary to confront the climate crisis. Thank you for being here today and for supporting this important project. I'm excited to see where these discussions will take us.
I should honor and respect a lecturer, Cambridge lecturer, Emily Webster, who passed away during the creation of the book. Her chapter is still here with Professor Megan Bowman. We appreciate everything she did. Here in Cambridge, it's appropriate to say that. I also want to thank especially the contributors, and you know who you are, I won't put anyone on the spot, who jumped in to help other contributors. Even from completely different regions of the world, completely different time zones, 3 o'clock in the morning, and made some of the chapters possible that otherwise actually wouldn't have been. We would have lost them along the way, which is fair with 9 years, right? If you think about it. But so many of you are in here as co-authors, and if you're not a co-author, you're probably cited. So, building an area where you're studying the law and you are advancing the law and you are gathering young people into that field and offering them space and asking them to help is a Herculean task. And every once in a while, we should take the time to celebrate. So that is one of the things we wanted to do today. And I deeply appreciate, Christina, you've been a star the whole way through. Zunaida, without you, it would not have been possible. I should recognize also Lydia Young, who was one of the other editors of the book, who ended up in bar school just when all the proofs came back, which is just the way life can sometimes get you. But everyone coming together really made this possible. And we have a very, very exciting set of written by the Paris Agreement architects, or in some cases, people who were young and idealistic when we were writing the UN Convention on Climate Change itself, right? I will say we put out over the WhatsApp group with about 200 lawyers the photo that would go on the front because we could not decide. And I will tell you that was one of the most fascinating international negotiations I've ever been part of. We finally ended up with the ocean, because it was important to us to show something that can be found all over the world in all regions, especially since our authors come from all continents. We ended up with the orcas, actually, the killer whales, not just because they're actually my totem animal. Wayne, you know this, but also because they are representatives in the Indigenous legal traditions of our country, of the coast of Canada, of loyalty and matriarchs who have that courage. Yeah. And I think what is maybe the most important story about the orcas in terms of climate law and governance and in terms of communities and pods moving forward and supporting each other is that they're not just intelligent cetaceans who live in highly organized societies and are trying to adapt to climate change by changing their entire way of living and may make it and may not. They're also seen as the cousins that swim of the Lumi people from the west coast of Canada and sort of the northwest United States. And when the salmon were scarce, the Lumi people went to feed their brothers who were hungry. And the stories say that when the people who live on the land were hungry, the killer whales would come and drive the salmon toward them in order to protect. And that is something that is probably important to know about why we finally chose this particular photo. The lighthouse is the Paris Agreement. I don't need to explain why we would put it as something like a lighthouse. But if you think about the role that law can play, sometimes an international treaty can be that lighthouse, that signal in the darkness. And I think that is probably more opposite now than it was last year when we adopted this photo. So congratulations, Christina. We actually managed to do it. And congratulations also, Zenaida and Lydia, wherever you are, to say thank you. Justice Kathy Ann, you are cited all the way through the book. The Atlos decision came in time. Justice Jawad, you are as well. And many of you here in the room, congratulations for your chapters and thank you. With that, I am overjoyed to be able to turn maybe the closing remarks to our host from the Louderback Center to help us as senior proctor of the university and chair of our disciplinary tribunal to close, because I've certainly said enough.
Thank you very much. To all who, with courage and contributions, developed the law in important ways with regards to climate change, biodiversity, and desertification. I think we need more of these integrated conversations in the future. And so thank you to the conveners. Special thank you to Antoinette, who's been the driving force behind this. Don't forget, we see each other in Bonn, we see each other in Belém, and the climate law and governance, the biodiversity law and governance, and the desertification law and governance conversations have to continue. Special thanks again to ADA Law School, who was the host and will pass the baton to our Brazilian university partners in this coming year. Thank you very much.